It's time for Business Minds Coffee Chat, an inspiring show about the journey to personal and professional growth. And now, your host, Jay Shear.
Hey everyone, you're listening to Business Minds Coffee Chat, and I am your host, Jay Shear, and I am super excited. I've got a fantastic guest on the show today. My guest is a board-certified psychiatrist, neuroscientist, psychedelic clinical researcher, teacher, and executive director of the Board of Medicine. He received his MD in medicine and PhD in neuroscience from Albany Medical College and specialized in psychiatry with a distinction in research at Western Psychiatric Institute and Clinic at the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center. He's one of only a handful of psychedelic experts credentialed as an MD and PhD in practicing ketamine-assisted therapy with his patients. Please welcome the CMO and co-founder of Apollo Neuro and the man who's helping us enhance the safety pathways in our nervous system so we can feel better and more at ease, Dr. Dave Rabin. Dave, it is so great to see you. Thank you so much for being here today.
Of course. Thanks so much for having me, Jay. It's a pleasure.
I would love it if you would share with all of us what your favorite thing is about yourself and why.
Oh, it's funny. I don't get that question very often. But I would say my favorite thing about myself is my curiosity. I have always been a very curious person. I've always wanted to know why we do things the way we do them, why we make certain decisions the way we make them, why things work the way they work in the human world and the natural world. And that curiosity for me is like rather unbounded. Like I don't really care about what's been done before. I don't really care about, the fact that we've done things forever and that's just the way we do it. That's never satisfied me. And I've always just tried to figure out like what's actually going on, right? What is humanity really here to do? What are we as individuals here to do? What does the biology say about that from a very like objective, science perspective, and really just like throwing my detective hat on and trying to figure out, the big why.
I love that. That's what a fantastic trait. Now, have you been curious?
To my parents' great dismay, of course.
Yeah. Okay, so both your parents are physicians, and how did your upbringing influence your perspectives and how you view the world today, and tie in that piece of curiosity as you answer that question, if you will?
Yeah, of course. It's a great question. I think there's a couple ways that my upbringing influenced my my life goals, development. How I came to sit here with you as a neuroscientist and a psychiatrist. I think the main two reasons were from a very young age, growing up Jewish and growing up in what I would call, for many Jewish folks who were growing up during my time, all of our parents experienced the Holocaust firsthand or secondhand, or had family members who were involved somehow in it and escaped or didn't. And so that really shifted their perspective on trusting other people, trusting the government, trusting anyone, building close relationships. And I think that, and I think it's interesting, not to spend any more time on organized religion, because I think it has a lot of problems, but the Jewish culture is very interesting in that we're always encouraged to ask why in Jewish culture. And if you look at the history of Judaism, what's real, like many of the rabbis spend their entire lives reading religious texts and then interpreting them and arguing with each other about what they say, right? Like this is like a core part of Jewish culture. And when I was learning, I was bar mitzvahed and went through, my Jewish American upbringing, that was still part of it. And it permeates. And even when we go to synagogue, on the weekends, like there were occasionally when you go, there'd be times where the rabbi would give a sermon and he'd ask the audience, the crowd, what do you think about what I just said? Right. And I, when I brought my now wife to some of these high holiday sermons and that kind of thing for these events at synagogue, she's Catholic. she couldn't believe that the religious leader, rabbi, would ever ask the audience what they thought. Right. It was just never something that she had ever seen in Catholic religion or Christianity. It was just not common or not normal to ask those kinds of questions. So there's certainly a cultural relevance to the big question of why, and kind of turning over every unturned stone. And then the second piece of it is that my parents are both physicians, and they've both done research. And as a researcher, you have a different approach to clinical medicine than as a doctor who's just providing care. As a researcher, generally speaking, and a doctor, you're always looking for a better way to do things. You're always looking outside the box at a problem, and not just saying, oh, this person's sitting in front of me and they check these boxes but not these boxes, so I'm just going to give them the things that address these boxes and target the symptoms. You say, well, could there be something else going on beneath the surface I'm missing? Right? And then that unlocks this diagnostic framework of thinking that we all learn in medical school, which is like, how do you understand a problem in its entirety and try to figure out what one or two things could be going on that are at the root cause of that problem, not just let me give you something to make your symptoms go away and let's put a Band-Aid on the broken leg or whatever it is. It's like, let's figure out what is at the root cause and try to get to that root cause like a detective, like who is the culprit here, right, in the body or in the mind, and let's try to help you figure that out. And I think that mentality of my parents, especially my dad is also an electrical engineer. So he is very into figuring out how things work. He taught me how to fix a lot of stuff in our house growing up. And so a lot of it was like always learning about why things work, how they work. And that just fascinated me. And then my favorite part of this story is when I was about 7 years old. I remember from about 4 to 7, I started having my first memories back when I was about 2. But when I was 4 to 7, I started to have, I can remember much more from that time because I started to have very vivid dreams. So just dreams that were so real that I could not distinguish them from my regular waking life. So they weren't necessarily scary or flying dreams. Sometimes they were, but usually they were just like, it would be like me having a conversation with my brother or a friend. And then I would be talking to that person the next day or the day after, and I would mention the conversation we'd had or something that happened. They'd be like, what are you talking about? That never happened. And I'd start to ask myself, wait, did that happen? And they just don't remember, or was that a dream? And this started to happen not very often, but it happened, repeatedly. And then when I became about 7 or 8, and I was really going to school more as a regular, young person, I started to have more nightmares. And I went to my parents and I said, what are these dreams? Because they're starting to get scary, and it's making it hard to sleep. And my parents, like many parents, said, don't worry about dreams. They're not real. They can't hurt you. And what they really meant was like, they can't hurt you, right? That's the most core take home there for any kid. Don't be afraid of sleep. Dreams are there. They just happen, but they can't hurt you. But that was never full enough explanation for me. And I really clung to this concept of the word real, because for me, after they said that, of course, I keep having these dreams. And then, as an adult talking to other people, especially my patients about their dreams, I realize I'm not the only one who has vivid dreams. This is like common through all humanity, that people have vivid dreams sometimes that it feels so real that they don't realize they're not. And then as I kept having these dreams and they kept feeling real, the feeling overtook my understanding of that word that my parents were trying to convey to me, which was, this is not real. But if it feels real as regular waking life, then there has to be some realness to it, right? Maybe the adults don't have the definition of the word real correct. And so it was really around that age of like 7 or 8, I started to ask this question of like, what is real? What does that word even mean? And is there like some other subjective, understanding of these terms that we use to describe reality and experience that are not fully there, right? Like we're missing a bunch of what's going on. And that really what spurred my curiosity in a large way, like a big way, going into like science fiction and consciousness and neuroscience. And I started to just read, especially as I got into high school, I just started to read everything I could find on consciousness and meaning and realness and all of these things. And sci-fi was like a big outlet for me at that time. But ultimately, you can see you could draw some lines as to how that led to where I am today.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, this is fascinating. And you just shared, there was a lot in that. And there's a couple things that I wanted to maybe explore based on what you just shared. So pull on a couple of threads. One of them is, when you mentioned about your Jewish upbringing and about the rabbi during a sermon asking the congregation what they thought. As you were having these dreams, you're 4 to 7 and then 7 to 8, at any point, did you happen to sit down and converse with your rabbi about these dreams, knowing that he was asking some interesting questions that would lead to maybe unpacking something a bit more deeply? Did you have those conversations? And if so, what did you discover? And if you weren't talking with him, other than your parents, was there any other adult figure who entered your life at this point to help you explore this more deeply?
No. I never talked to anybody about this stuff because I always thought that it was weird. I didn't know that other people were having these experiences. So I was like, I don't know if I feel like I didn't have the words and I didn't really feel comfortable exploring it with anybody. So I never talked to anybody about it in detail. And it wasn't until much, much later when I was in probably like medical school, really graduate school, when I really started seeing patients and talking to them about their experiences. Because when you talk to patients, when you build a trusting relationship with a patient, the amount of healing they get is directly proportionate to how candid they are with us, how much they're willing to say and tell us about their experience. So people are willing to tell you their deepest, darkest secrets if they trust you as a doctor or a therapist. So I started to get more perspective from my patients on what they were experiencing. And then I started to realize, oh, wait, this is like universal human experience. This is not just me. And then from there, this is going back to like early 2000s. And then from there, I started to really dive into this and learn more about these are really common human experiences. We need to talk about them. And that when you start talking about them with your patients, you can actually start to help them sift through what is going on underneath the surface in your dreams, which in a lot of ways is like the very first psychedelic experience that any of us have after being born is dreams. And it requires no drugs, which is really interesting, right? Because psychedelic means to reveal the mind. So it's looking beneath your consciousness at your subconscious and unconscious material. Dreams are like that in a lot of ways. It's like accessing the same state. You're in REM sleep, your memory consolidation, like the neuroscience really helped me. So when you enter REM sleep, which is when we do most of our dreaming, you're reconsolidating memories, which means you're taking the short-term stuff you just learned, and then your brain is processing that in the hippocampus and then passing it through all the way up to the long-term memory centers and organizing it. It's not just sending stuff into long-term memory. It's saying, this is worth keeping, and this is where it belongs. This is where it kind of sits in your framework of the world. And if you don't get good, deeper REM sleep, not only do you not get the recovery that you need to function during the day, and you feel tired a lot, but you also lose memory reconsolidation. And your memories can get disorganized or incorrectly placed in long term. So they're not like forming a concept of the world that's consistent with quote unquote reality, right?
So let's just talk about those memories for a moment. When those memories are cataloged and stored, as time goes on and as we think back over storylines in our life and those memories, the way that we remember things happening, does that change and evolve over time? So even though the memory may be stored, our version of it or the way that we recall it, does that change with the passing of time?
So absolutely. Meaning changes over time. So meaning is a neurological process. Like meaning is a process by which our neurons are talking to each other differently. And the reason why we form meaning, which is like the emotional content of an experience, is based on how we experienced it in the first experience, right? So trauma is a great example of this. When people experience trauma, which you can define trauma kind of in the modern definition as like one or multiple intense, meaningful events that happen over time where we feel unsafe and not supported, right? When those things happen, you are experiencing hardship from the perspective of not being safe. And so what happens? Well, you start to feel more unsafe in your own body anytime you're exposed to anything that reminds you of that challenging experience. To somebody else who has the exact same experience of hardship in a safe environment, they don't call it trauma. They call it growth, right? They call it learning. They call it developing new skills.
We're going to hit pause on our conversation to take a quick break to thank our amazing sponsors. My friends, you are listening to Business Minds Coffee Chat. Don't you go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Thank you so much for recommending us to your family and friends. When you need a 30, 60, or 90-minute massage, it's real easy to book your appointment online. MassageByNatalie.org. MassageByNatalie.org.
This is Jay Shear. Are you a business owner or entrepreneur trying to figure out how to improve and achieve greater results? If so, I'm speaking to you. I provide the tools, coaching, and accountability you need to gain clarity around your personal and professional goals, remove the excuses holding you back, build the mindset, leadership skills, and proven strategies to grow your business and become the best version of yourself. To learn more or to apply for my coaching services, call 904-236-0431 or visit JShearBusinessConsulting.com.
There's no business like show business like no business I know. Visit the Fitzgerald Performing Arts Center at Flagler Auditorium. We're about to release our new season of professional touring shows. Visit our website at flaglerentertainment.com. Sign up for our newsletter. You can be the first to know about our shows and special offers. And remember, every time you buy a ticket to a show, you support the performing arts in Flagler schools and you support our local economy.
All right, we're back. And again, you're listening to Business Minds Coffee Chat, and I am with my very special guest, Dr. Dave Rabin. We're having a great conversation, and we are going to continue that conversation right now.
If you take somebody who's experienced trauma and then you work with them in a therapeutic way, like we do in our clinic, and you help them reprocess the trauma from the perspective of safety because they trust me. And trauma essentially is the core trauma that happens and the response in the body after a traumatic event is what Gabor Mate talks about this a lot. It's this idea of like fractured self-trust. So that's the core trauma. It's if I couldn't keep myself safe in this situation and then I tell somebody about it and they blame me for getting myself into trouble, right? Rather than supporting me, then I feel like there's something wrong with me. And then I can't keep myself safe. Why wouldn't this happen again? Right? Can I trust myself to keep myself safe if something like this looks like it's about to happen again? Right? And so what that does is it takes your sense of self, which might have felt safe before you had that experience, and distorts it to one in which you no longer feel safe within your own skin. Wow. Right? And so now thinking about yourself takes on a meaning of uncertainty, fear, unpredictability, right? And that has a physiological response where your heart rate goes up more often and your blood pressure goes up more often and you breathe fast more of the time and you respond to stress hyper reactively, too fast, too much when there's no stress actually around. So when we do our trauma therapy, healing and processing with people, with or without psychedelic medicine as a tool, what we're actually doing is we're helping somebody re-experience in their own minds and bodies the feeling of going back and putting themselves in that position where they were traumatized or right afterwards, and they had that hardship, and then reprocessing it from the perspective of safety. And all of a sudden they realize, oh, that's not my fault. I was just doing the best I could. I couldn't have known better. And then I didn't have the support systems around me to help me after. But this event no longer defines my sense of self as a victim. It doesn't define me at all. It's just an experience that I can learn from. And all of a sudden, you have literally shifted the entire meaning of the past that might have defined you for decades into one that you can move forward from and leave behind, but move forward from in a way where you're growing from it and becoming a better, stronger, faster version of yourself rather than somebody who constantly feels like everything's out of your control and this experience you had is holding you back forever. Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense. So can you maybe give us a tangible explanation. I know this may be challenging, but when you're working on this reprocessing, it to me is that reframing the storyline, reframing the emotions, the feelings, the physiology, all of that to rewire or regroove the memory or the story from a perspective of safety, support, and empowering emotions. I'm trying to. I understand in essence where you're going. I want to be able to give our audience maybe a bit more of an explanation of what's happening, what you're actually doing.
Yeah, so I'll give you a very tangible example. So imagine that when you're a kid, all of your friends go to get ice cream and with you, and it's super fun, right? And you have these very fond, very pleasing memories around getting ice cream with your friends and your parents. And then one day you're like 8, 9 years old, and you walk into the ice cream shop and you get your ice cream, and somebody comes up to you and says, "Hey, I don't like you," and they beat the crap out of you. And then you go and tell your parents, and your parents are like, "What's wrong with you? Why'd you let them get away with that?" Right? Pretty normal, not good response, but a very common response. And very detrimental, because now this person who had this experience literally just went from associating ice cream with pure joy and love and deliciousness to being afraid to walk anywhere near an ice cream shop because it's a source of threat. They don't know if they're going to be safe if they walk in there, right? Because now that same person could be lurking inside and just beat them up for potentially no reason, right? And so what the treatment for that is, you've already seen one shift in meaning, right? You saw the shift in a memory of joy around ice cream to a memory of fear. And then everything around that, the kind of music that was playing in the ice cream shop at the time, the temperature of the air, the location in your town, the smell of waffle cones, all of these things can now trigger that same fear response. So you've seen one complete meaning shift. Total polar opposite from safety and joy, childhood joy, to fear, right? And so that has shifted meaning. And then to treat that, what we would do, this is a very simple example, but what we would do is we would take that person and we would expose them to the memory. We just say, "Hey, walk us through the memory of what happened." And they would walk us through, and we just say, "All right, what are you feeling in your body? What are you feeling? What are you thinking? What are the thoughts that come to you?" And we talk through it, and we help them like verbalize it and get it out. And then we say, "Do you know you're safe right now, even though you're having a hard time, remembering this?" And like, "Yeah, I know I'm safe. I know I'm with you. I know no harm can come to me in your office or wherever I am right now, but it's still painful." And so we say, "Okay, great. That's a great first step. You know you're safe. You can remind yourself you're safe. Step number 1. Number 2, then you start to say, all right, well, let's take you to this. Let's bring the smell of waffle cones to you, right? Let's bring the smell of ice cream. Let's walk around the area of your neighborhood where this happened." And we do that. And then that person starts to get afraid. And we say, "You know you're safe right now." And they say, "Yeah, I know I'm safe, but I'm still having like these fear memories come up." And we say, "Okay, well, tell us what that feels like. Like, what are you noticing in your body? Where is that fear stored? Is it in your chest? Is it tightness? Is it your shoulders going up? Is it your muscles getting tight? Is your neck sore? Are you getting tunnel vision? Like, what is it? What are you experiencing?" And that's called somatic processing. So it's really like bringing somebody back into their bodies, because the body is always in the present. The mind can be anywhere. It can be in the past, present, or future. Usually in the past or the future, especially if we're untrained, like most of us. But the body's always in the present. It's always in the here and now. It doesn't go anywhere. So the somatic processing directs people back into their bodies, back into the present, and then they can acknowledge, "Hey, my body's feeling really upset right now, and this is a fear response, but it's not warranted because Dr. Dave or my therapist here, and I know I'm safe," right? Then third step is you take them into the same ice cream shop or into a different ice cream shop. Then you take them into the same ice cream shop. You repeat, same thing over and over and over again. And after you've done that, which is called cognitive behavioral therapy with exposure, prolonged exposure, which is the leading talk therapy technique for PTSD, then every time you expose that person to the feeling of being safe in a situation any of those situations I just mentioned that used to trigger a direct fear response in their bodies and minds to the point where they, might faint or collapse or have to go to bed or have to run away or whatever it is, right? Or get into a fight with somebody, get on guard. You've literally retrained their brain with them. They've retrained their brain with your help to now associate that experience again with safety, just like they did when they were a little kid.
That is truly fascinating. So as we are winding down our conversation, I really could talk to you for hours, but I appreciate the time you've given us. I would love it if you would give all of us, including me, a challenge. What is one thing, Dave, that you would challenge us to do starting today?
Can I give you two?
Sure.
All right, so the first one's really easy. It's just get more hugs. Get more hugs and give more hugs. That's the number one thing. If everybody just gave more hugs and got more hugs, we'd all feel so much better every day. It would be life-changing. The second thing is more of a self-practice, and this is really important, and it's called self-gratitude. This is an indigenous technique that I learned. I mean, we learned about it in Western culture and Eastern cultures, but I learned it from the Shipibo tribal culture in Peru, which is one of the oldest tribal medicine cultures in South America. And self-gratitude is really the idea of every moment of your life, whether you're awake, whether you're asleep, as often as you can remember, try to find things in yourself that you can be grateful for. That's it. And most of us, myself included, were never taught to do this. And so what do? We look for things to be afraid of or things to be worried about, right? That's not gratitude. So anyone listening to this for free can literally transform their entire lives by just understanding that the neuroscience backs this ancient tribal technique of practicing gratitude. And it starts with the self. It starts with just, I woke up today. I got here today. I got to this moment. Despite everything, all the other challenges I had, I got here. It starts with taking a breath, right? And just being grateful for the ability in any moment to just say, I'm going to take a breath right now because I chose to, and nobody's going to stop me. And as soon as you start to do that and express gratitude for it, you're literally strengthening your gratitude muscle, which is like a muscle that you would strengthen. It's like a bicep, but it's not physical, and it's in your brain and in your heart probably. And you can strengthen this muscle anywhere you go without a gym. Like the world is your gym. And if you start to know that you can do it, you have the ability at any moment to stop what you're doing and just try to find something to be grateful for, and that it actually matters, you're actually rewiring your neurocircuitry to think about the world from a perspective of gratitude and joy and love rather than fear and worry and concern. And you can do that in any moment. I mean, like, what can be more empowering than that?
I love that. That is so good. Thank you for that challenge. Two different challenges, but they are interconnected and something that we can all do. So, Dave, one final question to you, and it is this. What is one of the greatest gifts that life has given you that you didn't realize at the time?
I would say, other than life itself, I would say the greatest gift is probably like belief. Like I think we often, like, growing up in any Western religion, with the idea of God as being like outside of us, you kind of start to wonder about, like, is there actually a God? Is there actually a higher power? Is there actually something? It doesn't matter what you personally believe. If you're listening to this, that's not important. What matters is that belief itself is real. Like, when you believe something, you're taking your human energy and putting it into something that is greater than you. Or it could just be you. It could just be believing in yourself, right? But you're believing in something. You're directing human energy into something. And that makes it that much more likely to happen the way you want it to happen. If you believe in yourself, the chances of you being successful in anything you do goes through the roof, right? If you don't believe in yourself, like, we know this about the placebo effect, right? If you believe a treatment will work, it works 30 to 50% more of the time. If you don't believe a treatment will work for you, it works 30 to 50% less of the time. And believing that it won't work actually is more powerful than believing that it will in terms of influencing the outcome. So, like, the mind is so powerful that if you start to recognize this ability that every single human on the face of the earth that was, just by nature of being born human, that we have access to, that we all have this power of belief, as soon as you realize that that's real, all of a sudden you start to restore a sense of control and power to your life, because you can believe in things you want and believe in yourself and know that there is, effectively science that supports that you will do better as a result. But belief itself is critically important. And I think that was one of the biggest gifts that I received in my life.
Beautifully said. That is so good. So, Dave, I want to thank you so very much. This has been a brilliant conversation. I truly appreciate you sharing, being your true, authentic self, allowing the conversation to go in a multitude of different areas. And I just want you to know how grateful I am for you. Thank you so much.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
And thank you so much for tuning into Business Minds Coffee Chat. We'll be back next Saturday morning at 8:30. And until then, my friends, keep learning and growing and keep doing the work to reach your potential. Take care.